Monsieur Blanchet dit que vous êtes arrogant envers les Canadiens en ce moment.
Just to let you guys know, further update on wildfires. As we did with Alberta a number of weeks ago and raised around $20 million, we will be putting forward matching funds with both Northwest Territories through the United Way and with Nova Scotia through the Red Cross, because Canadians across the country want to be there for their neighbours who are suffering through these terrible, terrible wildfires. Je veux vous annoncer que nous allons aller de l'avant avec des fonds via Centraide et la Croix-Rouge pour les territoires du Nord-Ouest et pour la Nouvelle-Écosse, pour que les Canadiens puissent continuer d'aider leurs voisins et leurs amis en difficulté avec les feux de forêt. Merci beaucoup tout le monde.
Thank you very much, everyone. I wanted to share some positive news about a significant change to the way that Canada's express entry system to recruit talented newcomers who come for economic reasons to Canada that's going to have effect over the next couple of months. Sorry if you're having trouble, I'll try to speak up over the noise. Just before I do offer some thoughts, I just want to draw some attention to something that's going on in my home province. For those of you who were here an hour ago, I apologize for the repetition, but the situation at home in Nova Scotia is extremely dire right now. There are wildfires that have set our communities ablaze. We are now dealing with a situation where nearly 20,000 people are displaced and hundreds of homes have been seriously damaged and are at risk of being engulfed in some instances by the fires. I want to say thank you in particular to the first responders on the ground and to organizations and community members who are doing their part to help their neighbours during this time of need. It is so sincerely appreciated. For our part, over the last few days, we've been doing what we can to identify resources that the federal government can make available, whether that's aerial surveillance. There are Coast Guard helicopters on their way to the scene to help now, and a number of other measures we put in place to support fishers who've lost days on the water to secure their livelihood, and we will continue to do more. Just in the last couple of hours, the province of Nova Scotia has made a request for further federal assistance. We're going to be coordinating the different federal departments who may be able to assist, and of course responding positively however we may be able to. There will be more to say in the days ahead as the situation becomes clear and our ability to help will be a little more advanced over the next number of hours and days. Now, for today's announcement, we have some very good news. We've been working towards changes for the Federal Express Entry System, which is the flagship federal economic program when it comes to welcoming newcomers to Canada. Under this program, we are able to identify some of the most talented people in the world who wish to come to Canada. The way the system operates is by assigning a score to a person on the basis of their education, their work experience, their age, their linguistic competencies, and a series of other factors. The highest scoring candidates will each year, when there are draws to welcome newcomers to Canada, will be invited to become permanent residents to this country. It's been very good at identifying talented people, but as has become clear as we deal with the labour shortage after the pandemic and the continuing concern around a skills shortage for the next generation, is that we needed to do more to make sure we're not just bringing talented people to Canada, but bringing talented people into the sectors that face the greatest demands. I'm pleased to share that over the next number of weeks, we are going to be moving forward with a category-based selection model under the Express Entry System. This is going to allow us to have targeted immigration practices that will allow us to do a specific draw for francophone newcomers to Canada, and it will also allow us to do specific draws in 5 key sectors. Those key sectors are healthcare, the skilled trades, STEM professions, science, technology, engineering and math, agriculture and transportation. What we've been hearing is these sectors are not only facing short-term demands, but over the course of the next number of decades, we expect some of these shortages to continue if further action is not taken. Over the next number of weeks, we'll be sharing information about the specific targeted draws for both francophone newcomers and the targeted draws in each of these key sectors. Des changements aujourd'hui est très important pour l'avenir de le système Entrée Express. Nous avons l'habilité pour choisir des personnes avec un processus pour la sélection axée sur les ensembles. Les industries en particulier qui bénéficient avec le nouveau outil et à transportation, agriculture, sciences, technologie, ingénierie ingénieur, this is my French teacher, we've been working on my pronunciation, et mathématiques, et soins de santé et les métiers aussi. C'est essentiel pour utiliser le système d'immigration pour chercher des personnes avec les compétences essentielles pour notre économie, avec l'habilité pour construire des maisons pour Canadiennes, avec l'habilité pour fournir les services dans le soin de santé aussi, et des autres secteurs. C'est très important pour moi aussi de continuer d'augmenter le nombre de nouveaux arrivants francophones qui arrivent à nos communautés chaque année. C'est très important pour protéger les poids démographiques francophones partout notre pays. Nous avons l'habilité pour choisir des personnes qui arrivent hors Québec et c'est très important pour moi. Et nous avons bonne nouvelle. L'année dernière, c'est la première fois que le gouvernement fédéral a atteint la cible de 4,4%. Nous continuons d'augmenter le nombre de nouveaux arrivants francophones et utiliser le nouveau outil pour accueillir des personnes avec les compétences essentielles. These are very important changes. Over the next number of weeks, we're going to be having these category-based draws that will welcome newcomers from these particular sectors, and in particular with French language competencies. It's no coincidence that my friend and colleague, the Honourable Jean-Yves Duclos, is with me, our Minister of Health, and I'd invite him to provide a few words on the importance of targeted selection methodologies through the express entry system to ensure that Canada has access to the healthcare workers that we need.
Yes, briefly, I wanted to be here, A, to commend Sean for his work, but B, to connect what he just said to the work we are doing together, health ministers, in not only accelerating immigration of competent and recognized people trained outside of Canada, but once they enter into Canada, to accelerate the recognition of their credentials. I want to point out that we have seen over the last few weeks very good progress on the part of Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick just yesterday, Ontario, BC, and other provinces, which are using the tools that Sean just mentioned to make sure that when people come into Canada quickly and more easily, they can get their credentials recognized. Au Québec, évidemment, on travaille différemment. On a un régime d'immigration économique qui est dirigé, et c'est tout à fait correct, par le gouvernement du Québec. Mais à nouveau, avec le gouvernement du Québec, avec le ministre Dubé, entre autres, l'annonce que vient de faire Sean il y a quelques instants, va nous permettre de faire ce que M. Dubé veut faire aussi, c'est-à-dire que quand des gens formés à l'étranger arrivent au Québec, on puisse rapidement reconnaître leurs compétences et les mettre au service des patients qui ont tellement besoin de soins ces temps-ci.
Mr. Fraser, regarding francophone immigration, what will be the biggest difference between yesterday and today? What will make the difference regarding francophone?
Well, with the changes that we're announcing today, we will be able to have a specific draw that's exclusively accessible to Francophone applicants to come to Canada under the express entry system. We will announce over the next number of weeks the specific date where we will be able to conduct that draw that will actually have newcomers with Frank language skills arrive in Canada. Ces changements est très important pour choisir des personnes avec les compétences linguistiques en français. C'est très important pour protéger la culture française, l'identité de la communauté en situation minoritaire aussi. C'est la première fois que nous avons l'habilité pour conduire un processus juste pour les francophones sur le système entrée express. This is a major change that's going to make sure that we have a specific number of spaces in our federal express entry system that are targeted exclusively for francophone newcomers.
And percentage or numbers, certain number? You said a certain specific place for francophone. Is that 10, 20, 40?
So we're right now in the process of reviewing what the next target will be across our immigration programs. Of course, the existing target for this year is 4.4%, which we were able to achieve last year. But in order to hit 4.4% nationally, the federal streams have to be much higher because, of course, different provincial programs, for example, that may welcome newcomers, it's difficult for us to predict with certainty what proportion of French newcomers they will welcome to their specific provinces. So we're going through that exercise now to set what the new target will be. But for this year, the target remains 4.4. I'm optimistic we can hit or exceed that number. But with this new tool, provided there are sufficient applications in our inventory, we'll be able to, with greater certainty, meet the targets that we set not only this year, but in the future, even with a more ambitious target.
Mr. Fraser, le Québec a décidé d'envisager d'augmenter leur seuil d'immigration. C'est quelque chose que vous les invitiez à faire l'année passée, je crois, vous nous avez dit ça en entrevue. Est-ce que vous avez un commentaire à faire là-dessus? Est-ce que vous croyez que c'est grâce à vous?
OK, je pense que je comprends la question. Si j'ai posé une...
Because of your invitation to Quebec that they raise the level of immigration.
Non,
How they're
non.
thinking about it.
Quand j'ai des conversations avec des Québécois, les pénuries de main-d'œuvre est très important. Il y a beaucoup de communautés rurales avec l'ambition d'expériencer la croissance économique. C'est une décision pour les provinces de Québec de mettre le niveau pour l'immigration au Québec.
Vous en pensez quoi?
Nous avons un accord, le Canada-Québec Accord, et nous envoyons proche de 700 millions de dollars pour l'intégration et francisation. Mais l'accord fournit l'habilité pour la province de choisir chaque personne, chaque nouveau arrivant économique, et pour mettre le niveau pour la réunification de famille et aussi pour les personnes qui sont plus vulnérables. Mais la décision est juste une décision pour le Québec. Ce n'est pas une décision pour moi. Je ne pense pas la perspective pour moi ou le gouvernement fédéral à mettre le niveau pour Québec. C'est une décision pour le ministre Rochette et le gouvernement provincial.
Québec, oui, Québec.
Did you want to...
Ce que je pourrais ajouter, puis ce que Sean a dit est tout à fait juste, comme Québécois et comme député de la circonscription en particulier, j'entends beaucoup de gens se réjouir du fait que, on va mettre l'accent davantage sur l'immigration francophone et deux, sur l'immigration régionale. Il y a à Québec là, un taux de chômage d'à peu près 1,9 qui impacte évidemment la capacité des restaurants, des hôtels, des usines à engager des gens, mais surtout, et je dirais dans beaucoup de contextes, la capacité des résidences pour aînés, des CHSLD, des hôpitaux, des services de garde à recruter des gens qu'on ne peut pas remplacer par des machines. Alors, à Québec, c'est sûr que l'ouverture récente du gouvernement du Québec, je réjouis et je vais travailler avec le maire Marchand, le maire Lahoulier pour appuyer le gouvernement du Québec dans cet esprit d'amener à Québec, en particulier, plus rapidement, entre autres, des gens dans le secteur de la santé.
Are you scared?
Labeling the cigarettes, please. Why did Canada decide to go that far to put an individual label on each cigarette?
Well, one reason, and that's the most important one, is that there are approximately 48,000 people every year who die of the consequences of smoking. That's obviously too many. And we are therefore putting into place that measure, which, as you will have known, is the first ever measure of such a sort put into place in the world. And we already know from UK partners and others that it's likely to be followed upon by other countries. Because although the rates of smoking have been falling over the recent years, and particularly for the younger Canadians, there is still much more to do to avoid that heavy death toll that we're still seeing in 2023.
Is there any evidence that it works, putting these labels on every cigarette? Is there any evidence it works?
Every possible tool works. It's in combination. And we believe that, we all know that it's not the package that causes the harm of smoking, it's the actual smoking. So people, when they see visibly a reminder of the terrible impact that smoking can have on their health, we believe that they will take action that will be protective of their health.
We're the first country, if we're the...
Il y a déjà des annonces sur les paquets de cigarettes, des avertissements. Pourquoi ça en prend sur les cigarettes même?
Parce que ce ne sont pas les paquets qui sont fumés, ce sont les cigarettes qui sont fumées. Ce sont les cigarettes qui causent du tort, qui mènent à 48 000 décès précoces au Canada et évidemment beaucoup au Québec. Et on pense que c'est la bonne chose à faire pour continuer à réduire le taux de cigarettes qu'on observe au pays. Et ce qu'on observe aussi, c'est que ça va encourager d'autres juridictions à travers le monde à mettre en place des mesures semblables.
On va arrêter là, on peut dire que le premier ministre arrive, donc on laisse.
Merci tout le monde.
Minister Bennett, could I just get a word on Health Canada issuing warnings on individual cigarettes?
Yeah, it's very exciting.
What do you think of that?
It's fantastic. I mean, it really is that there's poison in every puff. It is about whether people are sharing cigarettes or just taking them out of the packages isn't going to work anymore. We're the first country in the world to do it, and we did a roundtable with a lot of the organizations this morning that have been fighting about tobacco free. This is World No Tobacco Day, and so it was great to do the roundtable and have really from heart and stroke to cancer to lung, everybody very grateful that we've taken this big step.
Do you think it'll help with tobacco-related addictions? How effective do you think this will be?
Well, I think that, again, we have to do everything, And I think this has been something people have been calling for. We know the packages worked, but we know a lot of people take their cigarettes out of the packages, and it's particularly when they're sharing cigarettes, and particularly for youth, that there was a price point that matters. And years ago we got rid of the kiddie packs of 4 cigarettes. Each of these steps has really made a difference, and we want to be at less than 5% by 2035, and we're on our way.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
So language commissioner recommendations since yesterday, and will you follow on them?
Yes, so I met with the official languages commissioner
Yeah.
a couple of weeks ago to discuss with him the report.
Yeah.
And I agree with him. We need to all collectively work together at improving the overall culture in
Yeah.
the industry. So I am committed to this. It is
Yeah.
important that that companies and organizations hold their obligations.
Yeah.
Canadians deserve to receive service in the language of their choice.
Just to be sure, about the 2 recommendation you made yesterday, I want to put a plan for that airports and transport company are obligated to have a linguistic plan. Will you follow on that, and do you accept his recommendation?
We are, look, I accept his recommendation, and we're going to act on them.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm joined here today with my colleagues from both Nova Scotia and from the Northwest Territories. And I wanted to make sure that Canadians were aware that today the Prime Minister announced that we, the Government of Canada, will be matching funds with, first of all, the Government of Northwest Territories for funding for the United Way, and that's to assist people in the Northwest Territories, particularly in the Hay River area, that have been significantly impacted by wildfires in that region. And we also announced earlier today that we will also be matching with the province of Nova Scotia for all donations that Canadians make to the Canadian Red Cross to assist people who have been impacted by the wildfires in that province. And so that's one of the ways in which the Government of Canada, working with our provincial and territorial partners, can ensure that funds are available to those who have been impacted by these events. That money is intended to provide support community organizations that are assisting those who have been evacuated from their communities. Currently, there are literally tens of thousands of Canadians who have been displaced as a result of these wildfires. It's all hands on deck into dealing with the fires, but we also know how traumatic and impactful displacement and evacuation can be for people who have had to flee their homes, leaving their most prized possessions behind, and the great anxiety that evacuation can cause. And we know it's important to be there for them and to make sure that they have the resources to access food and shelter and get through what we hope will be a short period of time. But until the fires are out, we're very grateful for the work of all of our first responders, firefighters, community volunteers, the Canadian Red Cross, the United Way, and we want to also acknowledge the sacrifice and the challenges that Canadians have faced during these fires, and I want to assure them that we will be there for them. I also want to make note that this morning we received a formal letter of request from the province of Nova Scotia. To be very clear, we've been working very close with Nova Scotia authorities from the very outset of that. There have been a number of supports and resources that have been supplied by the Canadian Red Cross, the Canadian Coast Guard, the Canadian Armed Forces, and the Public Health Agency of Canada. We are now in receipt of a more formal request with respect to a number of resources that the province of Nova Scotia has identified, and we're working forward to deliver those resources as quickly as possible. We'll do everything possible to respond to the people of Nova Scotia and the Northwest Territories and in every part of Canada that's being impacted by these wildfires. I'll be happy to take any questions you may have, and if you have questions about a particular community, I think it's most appropriate to allow my colleagues from the impacted regions to respond to that as well.
Provide some more insight about what specific resources the Nova Scotia government has asked for. Is it military assistance? Is it Coast Guard assistance? A little bit more about that and how quickly those resources will be delivered.
Well, certainly, as I've said, the Canadian Armed Forces and the Canadian Coast Guard have been providing resources. We've also worked very closely with some of the communities, municipalities, and local officials down there, providing resources directly. But we now have a request. The first part of the request is primarily financial from the province of Nova Scotia. They were seeking assurances that the disaster financial assistance arrangement, which is in place to support the recovery from these events, will be there, and of course it will be. That's a program that's been in existence for over 50 years, and the eligibility is well understood, I think, by all of the provinces and territories and people who do that. But they have asked very specifically for additional resources from the Canadian Armed Forces, for example, and there's a number of equipment requests, and they've also asked for resources. And our Government Operations Centre and our officials will reach out to our provincial and territorial partners and even internationally to find the resources that they're asking for. There is a need for additional firefighting resources, additional firefighters. The volunteers and the professional firefighting service in the Halifax region have been working full out and around the clock for several days. It's clear that the fires continue to challenge those communities, and they need additional resources, and we'll do everything we can to help them find them. Thank you all very much. We'll all go back to work.